Power, for the Stoics, was never merely a matter of dominance or control over others. It was something subtler, sharper, like a blade hidden beneath the folds of a cloak. To outsmart another is not to crush them with brute force, but to see with clearer eyes, to anticipate with calmer judgment, and to act with a discipline that others lack. While the world grows loud with threats, strategies, and endless competition, the Stoic holds still, studies, and moves with precision. Outsmarting anyone begins not in the manipulation of others, but in the mastery of oneself. For what use is it to conquer the minds of others if your own thoughts are chaotic and enslaved? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." This is the first rule of absolute power, sovereignty of the mind. Imagine two men entering a negotiation. One is nervous, desperate to be liked, constantly speaking to fill the silence. The other is silent, steady, unshaken by pauses, weighing every word like a coin on a scale. Who holds the advantage? The one who does not need approval, the one who can tolerate silence without panic. Outsmarting others often begins with enduring what they cannot endure. Most cannot stand silence. Most cannot resist the urge to prove themselves. The Stoic, in contrast, allows the storm of emotions to pass, and when the noise dies down, he speaks with the force of measured clarity. The second rule of absolute power is the art of perception. Outsmarting is not about dazzling with cleverness, but about observing the weaknesses and illusions in others. Seneca taught that men are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. If you can see through the false views that guide others, you can anticipate their reactions before they even act. Consider the merchant who fears loss more than he desires gain. Consider the soldier who seeks honor above all else. These are levers, exposed and waiting to be pulled. Outsmarting anyone does not require invention. It requires attention. The Stoic learns to read the invisible script that others follow blindly. The third rule is restraint. It may sound paradoxical. How can power be found in restraint? Yet nothing exposes weakness more quickly than uncontrolled desire. Outsmarting others means watching them reveal themselves through their excesses. The man who cannot hold his tongue eventually betrays his own secrets. The woman who cannot resist boasting will give away her vulnerabilities. The leader who always seeks applause becomes predictable, a slave to those who grant or deny it. To see this is to wield quiet advantage. To practice restraint, on the other hand, is to become unreadable, ungraspable, a puzzle too complex to be solved by ordinary minds. The fourth rule of absolute power is patience. Outsmarting is not always about swift, dazzling moves. Sometimes it is about waiting, allowing others to exhaust themselves in their own haste. Epictetus compared life to a game where most people rush forward recklessly, blinded by impulse. The Stoic steps back, surveys the field, and makes the move that cannot be undone. Consider the river. The impatient swimmer fights against its current and drowns. The patient one lets the current carry him until he finds the right moment to strike for the shore. Outsmarting others requires knowing the timing that they do not possess, the ability to hold still when they are desperate to act. The fifth rule is control of appearances. Outsmarting others often requires concealing strength until the moment of revelation. The Stoic knows that to appear too eager, too confident, or too skilled can awaken unnecessary resistance. Instead, he plays the part of simplicity, of harmlessness, until the decisive moment arrives. This is not deception in the malicious sense, but strategy. You do not show the blade until the strike matters. History is filled with conquerors who failed because they revealed too much too soon. Power does not announce itself. It arrives unexpectedly, and by then it is too late for others to resist. The sixth rule is clarity of aim. Most people live scattered, chasing one desire today and another tomorrow. To outsmart them, you must have a steady aim, like the archer who does not loose the arrow until the target is certain. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In the same way, most people are distressed because they lack clarity. They cannot distinguish what is within their control from what is not. Outsmarting them is as simple as refusing to chase shadows. Power belongs to those who know what truly matters and ignore the rest. The seventh rule is the discipline of emotion. Outsmarting others is not achieved by louder rage or deeper passion, but by the calmness that sees beyond the fog of emotion. Anger blinds, jealousy distorts, fear paralyzes. To master these is to see further than others can. When your opponent is consumed by fury, he cannot think straight. When you remain composed, you see openings invisible to him. Seneca warned that anger is like temporary madness. It makes men forget themselves. If you can remember yourself while others forget, you have already outsmarted them. The eighth rule is detachment from outcome. Outsmarting does not mean obsessing over victory in every skirmish. It means being able to withdraw, to lose small battles without losing your composure, because the greater war is not won in one stroke. Detachment terrifies those who live desperate for immediate results. They cannot comprehend how you can remain unmoved in the face of temporary defeat. Yet this is the essence of power, to be untouchable, because your well-being is not hostage to external wins or losses. To outsmart others, you must remain a mystery, even to defeat itself. And so, the beginning of these 21 rules for absolute power is not found in manipulation, nor in cunning tricks, nor in hidden daggers. It is found in the Stoic discipline of mind, patience, restraint, and clarity. Outsmarting others is not about making them stumble into traps. It is about refusing to stumble yourself. The moment you are unshaken by their illusions, untempted by their bait, and unafraid of silence, you have already surpassed them. The rest of the rules, then, are only elaborations of this central truth: power begins within, not without. Outsmarting others is not about being cleverer than they are. It is about being freer than they can ever hope to be. The ninth rule of absolute power is the command of language. Words are not simply tools for communication. They are weapons, shields, and disguises. Most people speak to impress, to vent, or to fill the uncomfortable void of silence. The Stoic, however, uses words as the craftsman uses steel, carefully, sparingly, with purpose. A single phrase spoken with precision can silence an entire room, while endless chatter only weakens its speaker. Outsmarting others often requires saying less, not more. By leaving space between your words, you invite others to reveal themselves, to speak more than they should, to make visible what they intended to hide. The ancient philosophers often emphasized brevity because brevity is sharp. Those who cannot control their tongues become slaves to them. To master speech is to command attention without begging for it. The 10th rule is the reading of silence. While others rely only on what is said, the Stoic observes what is unsaid: hesitations, sudden changes of tone, contradictions between word and gesture. These reveal more than any declaration. Outsmarting others requires an ear for silence and an eye for what trembles beneath the surface. In a council, one man may loudly declare loyalty, yet his eyes dart nervously toward the door. Another may boast of courage, yet his hands tremble under the table. To see what is hidden between words is to wield an advantage few possess. Seneca reminded us that truth is often quiet, while lies are noisy. Therefore, train yourself to hear the quiet. The 11th rule is unpredictability. Nothing disarms an opponent more than inconsistency of pattern. If you are always predictable, always reacting the same way, always choosing the same path, others will learn to anticipate you, to trap you in your own habits. Outsmarting anyone requires the ability to break patterns, to surprise, to move in directions they never considered. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the universe itself is change. Why then should you cling to the rigidity of predictability? To live is to shift, to adapt, to become fluid. In strategy, this means never allowing yourself to be reduced to a formula. If they expect fire, give them water. If they expect withdrawal, strike. If they expect anger, smile. To outsmart others is to be what they cannot define. The 12th rule is selective disclosure. Knowledge is power, but shared knowledge is weakened power. Outsmarting others requires knowing what to reveal and what to conceal. Too many reveal their ambitions openly, and in doing so, they arm their rivals with ammunition. The Stoic knows when to speak of his aims and when to let them remain shrouded. It is not deceit, it is discretion. Seneca wrote that we should never entrust our secrets to chance, and when you speak recklessly, you gamble with your future. The one who outsmarts all is the one who shows enough to be trusted, but not enough to be betrayed. The 13th rule is emotional mirroring. Outsmarting does not always mean domination. It can mean reflection. When you mirror the emotion of another, you create a bond, a sense of recognition, even control. People are vulnerable to those who seem to understand them, to share in their feelings. The Stoic, even while mastering his own passions, knows how to project empathy as a tool. This does not mean false friendship, but strategic alignment. When others feel understood, they lower their guard, they reveal their hearts, and from this, their minds follow. Outsmarting often begins with the appearance of alliance. The 14th rule is the art of controlled retreat. Most view retreat as weakness, yet it can be the sharpest form of strength. To step back deliberately, to yield when expected to resist, confuses and disorients an opponent. The Stoic knows that withdrawal is not defeat if it prepares a more decisive strike. Epictetus taught that one should not seek to win every contest, but to master the self in every contest. Sometimes mastery means choosing not to fight, letting pride swell in your rival until it blinds him, and then advancing when his arrogance leaves him exposed. Outsmarting others often requires letting them believe they have won, only for their false victory to turn into their downfall. The 15th rule is the weaponization of calm. Nothing unsettles the agitated like serenity. When one man shouts, expecting rage in return, but is met with silence, he grows restless. When one seeks to provoke, but you remain unmoved, his efforts turn against him. Seneca wrote that no man is more powerful than he who cannot be angered. Outsmarting others means cultivating a calmness that no insult, no storm, no false accusation can disturb. This calmness is not apathy, it is discipline. Like a deep ocean beneath raging waves, it conceals strength that cannot be touched by surface tempests. The 16th rule is the disguise of weakness. To outsmart another, sometimes you must let them underestimate you. A hunter does not show his claws before the prey is within reach. In war, generals have feigned retreat to lure enemies into traps. In conversation, pretending ignorance can lead others to reveal more than they intended. Outsmarting is not about dazzling with brilliance, but about allowing others to overestimate themselves. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily not to appear too wise or too proud, for even wisdom can provoke resistance. To seem weaker than you are is not cowardice, it is patience in disguise. The 17th rule is the mastery of framing. How you define a situation often matters more than the situation itself. Outsmarting others requires controlling the narrative. If you define a loss as a lesson, you disarm the humiliation others expect you to feel. If you frame an insult as comedy, you rob it of its sting. If you frame obstacles as opportunities, you terrify those who thought to harm you. Seneca believed that the wise man suffers nothing, for he interprets all with reason. This power of interpretation is the sharpest tool of all. Outsmarting others begins with outsmarting reality itself, bending its meaning until it serves you. The 18th rule is the strength of invisibility. To be seen constantly is to be predictable, vulnerable, and exhaustible. Power requires scarcity. Outsmarting others means knowing when to withdraw from sight, when to vanish, when to let absence speak louder than presence. Most crave constant attention and, in craving, reveal their dependency. The Stoic, however, embraces invisibility as a weapon. Like the night that hides an army's movements, invisibility conceals intention and multiplies uncertainty. To be absent at the right time is to become unforgettable, for absence creates hunger, and hunger creates influence. And so, in these additional rules, we see the refinement of Stoic power: language controlled, silence observed, unpredictability embraced, disclosure measured, retreat strategic, calmness weaponized, weakness disguised, narratives reframed, and invisibility mastered. Each of these is less about external manipulation and more about internal mastery. To outsmart others is not to dazzle them with brilliance, but to remain unreadable, unshaken, and untouchable. The fool reveals himself in excess. The Stoic hides himself in discipline. And in that discipline lies the seed of absolute power. The 19th rule of absolute power is endurance. Outsmarting others is not only a matter of intellect or strategy, but of the ability to outlast them. Most people can burn brightly for a moment, but they cannot hold the flame steady when the winds of adversity rise. The Stoic knows that those who endure longer than their rivals eventually win without a contest. Marcus Aurelius reflected that we must be like a rock against which the waves break, remaining firm while the waters fall back, exhausted. Outsmarting, therefore, often requires patience not only in thought, but in suffering. To endure insult, rejection, delay, and hardship without collapsing is to hold a power that few can imagine. While others abandon the field in frustration, you remain, and by remaining, you inherit what they lacked the discipline to finish. The 20th rule is adaptability. To be rigid is to be broken, but to bend is to survive. Outsmarting others requires the ability to shift tactics, to learn new methods, and to move fluidly with the changing circumstances of life. Epictetus taught that we cannot choose our external conditions, but we can choose how to respond to them. Most people are trapped by habit. They cannot change course even when the path is destroyed. The Stoic, however, sees change not as an enemy, but as a companion. He bends with the storm, only to rise again when it passes. Outsmarting others means being able to move where they cannot, to think in ways they refuse to embrace novelty while they cling to the old. The 21st rule, the final one, is mastery of self. All previous rules, sovereignty of the mind, patience, restraint, silence, language, unpredictability, framing, are but fragments of this ultimate principle. Outsmarting anyone requires first outsmarting yourself, your fears, your illusions, your impulses, your vanity. Seneca insisted that no man is free who is not master of himself. Power without self-mastery is fragile, for it can be stolen by temptation or shattered by anger. The one who truly outsmarts the world is the one who no longer wars against himself. When you conquer the inner kingdom, the outer world becomes far less threatening. Outsmarting others, then, is not about humiliating them, but about rising beyond the games they are trapped in. To grasp these 21 rules together is to hold a philosophy of power unlike the shallow tricks taught by flatterers and demagogues. This is not about manipulation, which is brittle and temporary, but about the discipline of a Stoic mind sharpened into strategy. To outsmart others is not to deceive them, but to reveal the truth they cannot yet see. It is to remain steady when they are chaotic, to be patient when they are desperate, to endure when they are exhausted, to act with clarity while they stumble in confusion. Power in the Stoic sense is not loud, it is quiet, almost invisible, yet undeniable when it manifests. But let us descend deeper into the human experience of these rules, for philosophy alone is not enough. We must see them in action. Consider the battlefield not only of armies, but of daily life offices, families, friendships, negotiations. In the office, two rivals compete for promotion. One spends his energy boasting, seeking recognition at every turn. sabotaging others in the hope of appearing superior. The other remains calm, works steadily, speaks little, but delivers results when they matter most. When the time comes for judgment, who is truly in control? The one who outshined with noise, or the one who outlasted with substance? Outsmarting is not about the fireworks of attention, but the steady flame of discipline. Or consider relationships. One person is consumed by jealousy, suspicion, endless interrogation. Another is composed, observing without haste, acting with quiet certainty. In time, the jealous one collapses under the weight of his own insecurity, while the Stoic, calm and unmoved, sees the truth without being enslaved by passion. Outsmarting others is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is refusing to be dragged into the chaos where most of humanity lives. Now let us turn to history, where countless examples testify to these rules in action. Julius Caesar, though not a Stoic, understood the power of patience and timing. He knew when to conceal strength, when to retreat, when to let his enemies exhaust themselves. But contrast him with Marcus Aurelius, who, though emperor of Rome, sought not the conquest of others, but the conquest of his own soul. Marcus Aurelius's reign demonstrates that true power does not lie in dominating enemies, but in ruling the self with justice, discipline, and reason. Outsmarting others without outsmarting oneself leads to tyranny. Outsmarting oneself first leads to wisdom. It is crucial here to understand that Stoic power is not the pursuit of domination for its own sake. Outsmarting others must be guided by virtue, or else it corrupts the one who wields it. The Stoic seeks to be just even when powerful, to be merciful even when victorious. Without this, power becomes self-destruction disguised as success. Seneca warned that those who seek power without virtue are like men climbing a mountain of ice. The higher they go, the less secure they become, until inevitably they fall. To outsmart others without wisdom is to build a palace on sand. Therefore, the Stoics' rules for absolute power must always return to the anchor of virtue. Outsmarting anyone is not a license to manipulate, exploit, or betray. It is the ability to remain sovereign when others collapse, to preserve integrity when others sell theirs cheaply, to remain whole when others are fractured. This is why the final rule mastery of self stands above the others like a pillar holding the weight of the structure. Without it, the entire philosophy collapses into mere cunning. With it, the rules become a way of life, a shield against chaos, and a compass pointing always towards strength, resilience, and clarity. And so, we have traversed the 21 rules. But the journey does not end here, for philosophy demands more than knowledge. It demands practice. Outsmarting others will not come from memorizing these rules like a soldier reciting commands. It will come from daily reflection, nightly self-examination, morning preparation, constant vigilance. Marcus Aurelius kept his meditations not to impress others, but to remind himself again and again of the discipline he sought to embody. The Stoic life is a rehearsal for the moment when power will be tested, when patience will be strained, when silence will become your weapon, when restraint will be your fortress. Thus, the path of Stoic power is not a straight line, but a circle. Each day you return to the beginning, sovereignty of the mind. Each day you train perception, restraint, patience, silence, unpredictability, detachment. Each day you conquer yourself anew. And in conquering yourself, you outsmart the world, not by crushing it, but by standing apart from its madness. Outsmarting others is not about building a cage for them. It is about refusing to enter the cage they build for themselves. To understand the true essence of outsmarting others, we must now move beyond the individual rules and into the landscape they create together. The Stoic does not see each principle in isolation, but as threads woven into a larger fabric of power. Outsmarting is not a trick, nor a sudden revelation. It is a way of being, a posture toward life that transforms every encounter into an opportunity for mastery. When you embody these principles, you no longer need to calculate each move. You become the strategy itself. Like a seasoned general, You carry within you the discipline, foresight, and calmness that make every situation bend to your advantage. One of the most overlooked dimensions of Stoic power is the ability to disarm without conflict. Outsmarting is not always about checkmate. It is about making the opponent lay down his pieces willingly. Consider how Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. This is not weakness, but brilliance. When others expect you to retaliate with equal fury, you answer with dignity, and their rage dissolves into embarrassment. Outsmarting others means forcing them to confront their own ugliness in the mirror of your composure. They expect fire and receive stillness. They expect venom and receive clarity. In this way, you defeat them without lifting a finger. Another dimension is the art of anticipation. Outsmarting requires more than reacting skillfully. It demands seeing further than others. Seneca advised practicing adversity before it arrives, rehearsing hunger, poverty, and insult in the imagination so that when they come, you are already prepared. Outsmarting others means living ahead of them, experiencing tomorrow before they reach it. While they are caught off guard by misfortune, you are already calm, having shaken hands with hardship long ago. Outsmarting is not prophecy, it is preparation. The one who is always ready cannot be defeated by surprise. Yet anticipation is not only about misfortune, it is about opportunity. Outsmarting requires recognizing openings invisible to others. Most men pass through life half asleep, distracted by vanity, greed, or fear. The Stoic walks awake, attentive to details, noticing when others lose focus. In a conversation, it may be the hesitation that reveals doubt. In politics, it may be the silence that signals weakness. In business, it may be the trend ignored by those too comfortable with old methods. Outsmarting others is often about stepping through the door they never noticed because their eyes were fixed on illusions. We must also reflect on the paradox of control. Outsmarting seems to imply mastery over others, but in truth, it is mastery over the illusion of control itself. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that we cannot govern fortune, only ourselves. Outsmarting others, therefore, is not about forcing them to obey, but about maneuvering within the limits of reality more skillfully than they can. If the wind favors them, you do not curse the sky, you adjust your sails. If fortune turns against you, you do not collapse. You endure with composure until the storm passes. Outsmarting is not domination, it is navigation. In this sense, absolute power is not absolute in the vulgar sense of tyrants and despots. It is absolute in the sense of independence, freedom from dependence on fortune, applause, or fear. The tyrant may seem powerful, but he is the greatest slave of all, a slave to ambition, to paranoia, to the endless need for control. The Stoic who rules himself, who practices these rules daily, is untouchable. Outsmarting anyone does not mean chaining them, it means refusing to be chained by them. Another critical dimension of Stoic outsmarting is self-effacement. Outsmarting others does not always involve shining in the light. Often it involves disappearing into the shadows. Many men ruin themselves by demanding recognition, by craving the crown before the battle is over. The Stoic, however, is content to be underestimated until the decisive moment. Outsmarting means letting others waste their strength in seeking applause, while you build your strength quietly. When recognition finally comes, it is inevitable, not begged for. Power that comes from silence is harder to uproot than power that comes from noise. Consider also the Stoic practice of nightly reflection. Outsmarting others is not an act confined to the battlefield of the day. It begins in the solitude of the night. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus all emphasize the importance of examining one's actions at the end of each day. Where did I give in to anger? Where did I fail in patience? Where did I waste words or reveal too much? By rehearsing these questions, the Stoic sharpens his mind like a sword honed on stone. Outsmarting others tomorrow begins with scrutinizing yourself tonight. Those who never reflect live blindly. Those who reflect anticipate not only their own weaknesses, but also the weaknesses of others. And then there is the role of memory. Outsmarting requires not only foresight, but also remembrance. The Stoic remembers insults, but not for vengeance. He remembers them as exercises in endurance. He remembers betrayals, not to nurse bitterness, but to avoid repeating trust where it is undeserved. Outsmarting others requires building a storehouse of experience, a treasury of lessons, so that no deception fools you twice. Where others stumble again and again on the same stone, you walk with eyes open, guided by memory as much as reason. But let us not mistake outsmarting for cynicism. Stoicism never taught suspicion for its own sake. Outsmarting is not about distrusting everyone, but about refusing to be naive. Trust for the Stoic is given wisely, not recklessly. Outsmarting others often means knowing who deserves trust and who does not, who is led by reason and who is enslaved by passion. The fool trusts blindly and is betrayed. The cynic never trusts and is isolated. The Stoic, however, walks the middle path. He trusts where virtue is evident and remains cautious where vice is likely. In this way, he outsmarts both the naive and the cynical, who are equally enslaved by extremes. Ultimately, Part 4 reminds us that the rules of Stoic power are not tricks to be memorized, but habits to be embodied. Outsmarting others is not about being clever in moments of crisis, but about cultivating a way of life that makes every crisis easier to face. To embody these principles is to become a fortress, calm within, sharp without, immovable yet adaptable, silent yet eloquent. Outsmarting anyone, then, is less about cleverness and more about consistency. The world is full of clever men who rise and fall like sparks in the wind. The Stoic rises slowly, patiently, and endures like a star in the night sky. Now some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. The mark of one who truly outsmarts the world is not brilliance in a single moment, but the ability to live in such a way that every moment becomes an expression of discipline. Outsmarting others is not simply an act of strategy. It is a way of existing in which one's very character becomes a shield and a weapon. The Stoic understands that strategy is fragile if it is not rooted in habit, and habits are fragile if they are not rooted in philosophy. Therefore, to wield absolute power, one must transform the 21 rules into a rhythm of life. One of the most subtle arts in this rhythm is the balance between visibility and invisibility. Outsmarting others requires knowing when to step into the light and when to disappear into the shadows. Too much presence breeds familiarity, and familiarity erodes mystique. Too much absence creates irrelevance. The Stoic, like a skilled commander, knows when to reveal his strength and when to cloak it. Marcus Aurelius himself, though emperor of Rome, often sought retreat into his own thoughts, withdrawing from the endless demands of politics into the inner fortress of reason. Outsmarting others means moving like the tide, present enough to shade the shore, absent enough to preserve your strength. Another layer of this discipline lies in the economy of energy. Most men waste themselves in trivial pursuits, arguments that do not matter, desires that scatter their focus, competitions that leave them exhausted and empty. The Stoic, however, is economical with his energy. He does not fight every battle, does not chase every coin, does not defend every insult. Outsmarting others requires recognizing that energy is the currency of power. If you waste it on shadows, you will have nothing left for substance. Seneca warned against the tragedy of busy idleness, those who seem endlessly active but achieve nothing. Outsmarting anyone means reserving strength for the decisive moments, letting the small skirmishes pass while preparing for the battles that truly shape destiny. Discipline in energy leads naturally to discipline in attention. Outsmarting others requires the ability to see clearly where they are distracted. Most men cannot focus. They are torn by endless noise, news, gossip, temptations, fears. The Stoic trains his mind to be a laser, narrow, sharp, unmoved by distraction. He reads what others ignore, notices details others overlook, contemplates truths others avoid. Outsmarting others, therefore, is not about possessing superior intelligence, but about possessing superior attention. In a world drowning in distraction, the one who can hold focus is already a master. Yet attention alone is not enough. It must be paired with interpretation. Outsmarting others requires the ability to interpret events without being enslaved by appearances. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to strip things down to their essence. Food is dead animal and fermented grapes. Luxury is merely polished stone. Fame is the noise of strangers. By reducing appearances to their reality, the Stoic disarms them of their power. Outsmarting others means refusing to be blinded by illusions. Where they see treasures, you see trinkets. Where they see threats, you see wind. Where they see chaos, you see patterns. The fool is deceived by appearances. The Stoic outsmarts him by seeing reality as it is. One of the greatest demonstrations of this principle is the handling of insults. Most people reveal themselves when mocked because they cannot resist the wound to their pride. They answer insult with rage, proving the insulter's power. The Stoic, however, is unshaken. He knows that insult harms only if you consent to it. Outsmarting others in these moments requires reframing, to see insult not as injury but as exposure. The insulter reveals his own pettiness, his own lack of control, his own weakness. By refusing to react, you force him to confront himself. Outsmarting does not always mean striking. It often means standing still while the enemy destroys himself. But perhaps the most dangerous arena of outsmarting is within the self, for pride is the most cunning opponent of all. Outsmarting others is worthless if you fall victim to the delusion of your own superiority. Seneca warned against pride as the hidden poison that corrodes virtue from within. To outsmart the world but be conquered by vanity is to lose everything. Therefore, the Stoic practices humility not as weakness but as protection. Outsmarting requires remaining invisible even to your own ego, refusing to believe the illusions of grandeur that destroy rulers and ruin philosophers alike. The wise man does not declare his wisdom, for his silence already proves it. We must also remember that outsmarting is not always about conflict. It can also be about harmony. Outsmarting others sometimes means making them allies without their even realizing it. Through kindness, patience, and measured generosity, the Stoic binds others to him more firmly than fear ever could. Outsmarting, therefore, can appear as friendship, as loyalty, as calm leadership. To be trusted while remaining independent is one of the greatest victories. While others seek to dominate by fear, the Stoic dominates by trust, which is harder to win and harder to lose. Outsmarting does not always need to feel like victory to others. It can feel like love. And yet, even in harmony, the Stoic remains vigilant. He knows that even friends may falter, that loyalty is fragile, that betrayal often wears the mask of intimacy. Outsmarting others requires seeing clearly without becoming paranoid. He does not withdraw from trust, but balances it with caution, remembering that every man is subject to weakness. Outsmarting is not about living in suspicion, but about never being surprised by human frailty. In this way, the Stoic remains prepared for betrayal without poisoning himself with bitterness. In this fifth reflection, we see that outsmarting others is not a matter of sudden cleverness, but of sustained character. It is about controlling energy, mastering attention, stripping away illusions, reframing insults, avoiding pride, cultivating trust, and balancing vigilance with harmony. Outsmarting others is not a duel fought once, but a life lived daily with discipline. The fool thinks that cleverness lies in winning an argument. The Stoic knows that cleverness lies in mastering the self so thoroughly that no argument can defeat him. Thus, the Stoic way of outsmarting is less about cunning schemes and more about becoming the kind of person who cannot be deceived, distracted, or destroyed. Outsmarting, in the end, is not about being more intelligent than others, but about being more disciplined than they are. And discipline is available to all, if only they are willing to sacrifice vanity for clarity, noise for silence, pride for patience. In this sacrifice lies the foundation of absolute power. The Stoic path to outsmarting others does not end with discipline of mind or control of appearances. It extends into the subtle realm of influence. Outsmarting is not merely about resisting manipulation. It is about guiding others without their awareness, bending the course of events with the gentlest of touches. True power rarely announces itself. It works quietly, shaping outcomes as water shapes stone. To embody these 21 rules fully, the Stoic must learn not only to defend against deception, but to employ wisdom as a kind of invisible persuasion. One of the greatest tools in this art is the mastery of rhythm. Life itself moves in rhythms. Tides rise and fall. Markets expand and contract. Men grow bold and then grow fearful. Outsmarting others requires knowing when to press forward and when to withdraw, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act with force and when to let time act for you. Most people are impatient. They strike at the wrong time. They demand results before the fruit is ripe. They panic in the silence between movements. The Stoic, however, moves in harmony with rhythm. He recognizes that influence is most effective when aligned with timing. Outsmarting, therefore, is often a matter of patience combined with perception, waiting until the world itself conspires to make your move irresistible. Another dimension is the Stoic's relationship with fear. Outsmarting others requires recognizing that fear governs most human behavior. Men fear loss, women fear betrayal, rulers fear rebellion, and workers fear obscurity. To understand what others fear is to understand how they will act. But the Stoic is commanded by a higher rule. Fear not what is outside your control. By training himself to see death as natural, loss as inevitable, and suffering as survivable, he becomes free from the chains that bind others. Outsmarting then becomes simple. The one who fears less rules over the one who fears more. A man unafraid of death cannot be intimidated. A man unafraid of loss cannot be blackmailed. A man unafraid of solitude cannot be manipulated with exile. Outsmarting others begins by holding no leash that they can tug. Equally powerful is the use of contrast. Outsmarting others requires standing apart from their habits, for difference creates attention, and attention creates leverage. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes striking. In a crowd chasing luxury, simplicity becomes invincible. In a time of haste, patience becomes terrifying. The Stoic outsmarts others by embodying the opposite of their vices. Where they are restless, he is calm. Where they are greedy, he is content. Where they are boastful, he is restrained. This contrast unsettles them, for it reveals their weakness without a word. Outsmarting is not always active. It can be passive, simply living in such a way that others cannot comprehend your strength. The Stoic must also master the art of observation without judgment. Outsmarting others often requires seeing them clearly, without the distortion of anger or disdain. If you despise your rival, you will fail to study him. If you envy your enemy, you will exaggerate his power. Outsmarting requires neutrality, the cold gaze of a physician diagnosing an illness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to expect betrayal, selfishness, arrogance, and ignorance, not with bitterness, but with realism. Outsmarting others begins with refusing to be surprised by human behavior. You cannot anticipate what you refuse to acknowledge. Another tool in the Stoic arsenal is the control of rewards. Outsmarting is not only about denying opponents their power, it is about granting favors wisely. People reveal themselves not only in adversity, but in gratitude. Some grow loyal when rewarded, others grow arrogant. Some use gifts to deepen trust, others use them to demand more. By controlling how and when to give, the Stoic learns the true character of those around him. Outsmarting others means using generosity as a mirror, showing them who they really are. Seneca himself spoke extensively on gifts, insisting that the wise man gives not for applause but as an act of judgment, testing the soul of the receiver. And then there is the principle of deliberate obscurity. Outsmarting others sometimes requires hiding in plain sight, making your intentions so complex or contradictory that no one can predict them. The Stoic is not bound to reveal everything he knows or intends. By remaining enigmatic, he forces others into uncertainty, and uncertainty is paralyzing. A rival who does not know whether you are friend or foe, weak or strong, prepared or unprepared, cannot act with confidence. Outsmarting others means forcing them into hesitation while you remain unshaken. In hesitation, they betray themselves. A further layer of Stoic outsmarting is the ability to endure misunderstanding. Most people are slaves to their reputation. They cannot stand to be misinterpreted, slandered, or judged unjustly. They rush to defend themselves, and in their defense, they reveal their insecurity. The Stoic, however, can remain silent under accusation because his conscience is his only true judge. Outsmarting others often means allowing them to misinterpret you, for their misinterpretation becomes their weakness. While they waste energy gossiping, you preserve energy for decisive action. To outsmart is to understand that false opinions about you are not shackles, they are opportunities. But perhaps the deepest layer of outsmarting lied in the Stoics' capacity for inner abundance. Outsmarting others ultimately rests on the principle that power cannot be taken from one who already has everything he needs within. A man who needs little cannot be bribed. A man who desires little cannot be deceived. A man who fears little cannot be controlled. This is why the Stoic trains daily in detachment, reminding himself that wealth, reputation, and pleasure are external. Outsmarting others becomes effortless when you no longer play the same game they are trapped in. They seek applause, you seek clarity. They chase victory, you chase virtue. They lose themselves in the chase, while you remain free. Outsmarting, then, is not a matter of superiority, but of independence. In Part 6, we see that outsmarting others is not only a matter of visible tactics, but of invisible strength, mastery of rhythm, freedom from fear, contrast with vice, clarity of observation, control of generosity, deliberate obscurity, endurance of misunderstanding, and inner abundance. Together, these create a kind of armor no rival can penetrate. Outsmarting others, in the Stoic sense, is less about defeating them and more about transcending them. While they play games of deceit, you remain grounded in virtue. While they chase shadows, you walk in daylight. While they are exhausted by fear, you are refreshed by freedom. And so, you outsmart them, not because you are cleverer, but because you are freer. By now, the philosophy of outsmarting should feel less like a collection of tricks and more like a way of inhabiting the world. The Stoic does not seek to win every battle with cunning gestures, nor to crush others with relentless force. Outsmarting, as we have seen, is the art of remaining untouchable by the illusions that govern most people's lives. Yet there is still more to uncover: how these principles transform into a living strategy in daily existence, and how the Stoic mind turns every encounter, whether hostile or neutral, into a chance for advantage. One of the sharpest applications of Stoic outsmarting lies in the realm of provocation. Most men are easily baited. They cannot endure insult without answering back, cannot endure delay without complaint, cannot endure being ignored without agitation. The Stoic, however, outsmarts provocateurs by refusing to dance to their tune. Silence becomes his counterattack. Consider the quarrel where one party grows louder and louder, desperate for reaction, while the Stoic remains still, eyes calm, words measured. Eventually, the fury burns itself out, leaving only exhaustion. Outsmarting, in this sense, is not about clever retorts, but about mastering the ancient discipline of not being moved. You defeat the provoker by refusing to provide the stage on which he performs. Closely tied to this is the art of economy in conflict. Outsmarting does not mean engaging in every contest that presents itself. The fool rushes into every duel of words or power, while the Stoic chooses his battles with care. He knows that every fight costs something: energy, time, reputation, peace of mind. Outsmarting others often means letting them believe they have triumphed in small matters, so that they waste themselves while you conserve strength for decisive moments. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that most disputes are trivial, unworthy of disturbance. To outsmart others is to allow them their little victories, while you prepare for the greater one. Another field of Stoic outsmarting is deception, not the active deceit of lies, but the strategic use of ambiguity. Outsmarting others does not require feeding them falsehoods, it requires allowing them to deceive themselves. Human beings are prone to project their fears, hopes, and illusions onto the blank spaces of silence. If you provide no declaration, no obvious plan, no confession of intent, they will fill the void with their own assumptions. And assumptions are fragile weapons, for they collapse at the first encounter with reality. The Stoic outsmarts others by allowing them to misinterpret him, and when they act on false interpretations, they undo themselves. A further dimension is the use of composure as contagion. Outsmarting is not always about destabilizing the other. Sometimes it is about stabilizing yourself so deeply that others unconsciously begin to mirror you. When a leader remains calm in crisis, the followers begin to breathe slower, to think clearer. When a negotiator refuses to show panic, the other side begins to question its own urgency. Outsmarting others can mean making your calmness the gravitational center of the situation, forcing everyone else to orbit around your steadiness. Seneca taught that virtue is magnetic. It draws men without their realizing it. The Stoic who masters himself outsmarts others, not by pressure, but by presence. Yet presence can also be sharpened into absence. Outsmarting others sometimes requires withdrawal at the exact moment when they crave your attention. By denying them the satisfaction of engagement, you turn their energy inward, forcing them to wrestle with their own uncertainty. Think of a rival who seeks constant reassurance, or an adversary who wants your acknowledgement. By stepping back, by withholding presence, you allow their own restlessness to consume them. Outsmarting, in this case, is an art of subtraction, proving that sometimes less interaction carries more influence than constant confrontation. Another form of Stoic outsmarting emerges in the handling of ambition. Most men are blinded by their hunger for advancement, by the glitter of titles and positions. They chase rank without realizing that in chasing, they become predictable. The Stoic outsmarts them by stepping aside, by refusing to participate in the obvious contest. He appears uninterested in the crown, yet when the crown becomes too heavy for others, it is he who is sought as the one capable of bearing it. Outsmarting, therefore, is not about always reaching. It is about making yourself the inevitable choice when others collapse under their own greed. Epictetus said it plainly: do not strive to be invited, but live so that the invitation must come. We also see this principle in the Stoic handling of time. Outsmarting others often comes down to patience, allowing them to waste themselves in haste while you progress steadily. Most men underestimate time. They want everything at once. But the Stoic treats time as his ally, stretching his plans over years if necessary, knowing that consistency defeats brilliance when brilliance burns too quickly. Outsmarting others means learning the long game, refusing to measure progress by today's applause, but by tomorrow's endurance. This patience is terrifying to those who cannot wait, for they are like gamblers addicted to instant results. while the Stoic invests quietly in the certainty of eventual mastery. Finally, Stoic outsmarting is revealed in the mastery of endings. Most people cling desperately when something is over: relationships, projects, opportunities. They cannot release, and in clinging, they lose dignity. The Stoic outsmarts them by knowing how to let go. He ends with calmness, steps away without regret, accepts the close of chapters as natural. Outsmarting others, in this sense, is not about defeating them, but about rising above the desperation they cannot escape. To know how to end with grace is to wield a power beyond understanding, for it shows that nothing holds you hostage, not the past, not the present, not the illusions of permanence. Thus, Part 7 reveals that Stoic outsmarting is not limited to rules on parchment, but to living practices: refusing provocation, conserving conflict, letting others deceive themselves, radiating composure, withdrawing presence strategically, sidestepping ambition, wielding time patiently, and mastering the art of endings. Together, these make the Stoic not only difficult to defeat, but impossible to entangle. Outsmarting others is not about constantly outthinking them. It is about living in such a way that their very attempts to manipulate or provoke dissolve against the fortress of your character. The end of this journey, through the 21 rules for absolute power, does not bring us to a throne, nor to the roar of applause, but to something quieter and more enduring: sovereignty over oneself. To outsmart others, we have learned, is not to weave endless tricks or to play the shallow games of manipulation, but to construct a fortress of discipline, patience, and clarity. The world imagines power as domination. The Stoic knows it as freedom. And in freedom lies the ability to remain unmoved while others are enslaved by their passions, their fears, their illusions. Think of the countless men and women who seek control through wealth, titles, or influence. They appear mighty, yet they tremble at every whisper of gossip, every fluctuation of fortune, every loss of admiration. They cannot sleep without the comfort of approval, cannot breathe without the air of recognition. Such people are easily outsmarted, for their chains are visible. The Stoic, in contrast, strips away every chain, refusing to place his happiness in the hands of others. Outsmarting, therefore, is not about cleverness in the moment, but independence for a lifetime. This independence shines most clearly in adversity. Anyone can appear composed when fortune smiles, but the true test of power is to remain unshaken when fortune frowns. Outsmarting others often comes down to this: when they panic, you endure. When they despair, you adapt. When they collapse, you stand firm. To the Stoic, adversity is not an enemy, but a mirror, showing the difference between those ruled by impulse and those ruled by reason. Marcus Aurelius endured wars, plagues, betrayals, and loss, yet he returned again and again to his inner citadel. Outsmarting others, in the final sense, means building such a citadel within yourself that no storm can reach its walls. We must also recognize that to outsmart others is not always to defeat them. Sometimes it is to guide them. Power without virtue is destruction, but power with virtue becomes leadership. The Stoic does not seek to crush his rivals, but to elevate all through the clarity of his example. Seneca reminded us that true greatness is to lift others up, not to push them down. Outsmarting others, then, can mean showing them the illusions they serve, leading them gently toward freedom. It can mean breaking the cycle of provocation by refusing to respond in kind, or turning an enemy into an ally by extending trust where suspicion expected hostility. The highest power is not manipulation, but transformation. Yet the Stoic never forgets that human beings will remain bound to weakness. Outsmarting others, therefore, requires eternal vigilance. There will always be envy, betrayal, deception, provocation. To live is to encounter these daily. But the one who embodies the 21 rules does not fear them. He expects them, prepares for them, and transforms them into opportunities for practice. The insult becomes an exercise in patience. The betrayal becomes a test of foresight. The failure becomes a lesson in resilience. Outsmarting others is not about escaping the human condition, but about turning its trials into strength. The culmination of these rules can be seen in the figure of the wise man described by the Stoics. He is not invincible because nothing can harm him physically, nor untouchable because no insult ever reaches him, but because his happiness depends only on what lies within. Outsmarting anyone becomes second nature, for he cannot be bribed, deceived, or enslaved. His calmness disarms rage. His patience outlasts fury. His silence exposes folly. His endurance conquers time. Such a man does not seek power, and yet power flows to him, for people are drawn to the stability they cannot find in themselves. We must remember, too, that the art of outsmarting is not reserved for emperors, generals, or philosophers. It is for the common man facing betrayal in friendship, the woman enduring injustice at work, the young student resisting the pressure of conformity. In each case, the rules apply. Outsmarting is not about grand victories on public stages, but about quiet victories in the private theater of daily life. To endure insult without losing dignity, to resist haste in a world addicted to speed, to remain calm when others collapse. These are the marks of power greater than crowns or armies. And so we return to where we began, with the sovereignty of the mind. Outsmarting anyone requires first mastering the self. Every rule circles back to this, like rivers returning to the sea. Silence, patience, restraint, unpredictability, endurance. Each of them is a fragment of the greater whole, self-mastery. Without it, the rules become manipulation and collapse under the weight of pride. With it, the rules become wisdom, shaping not only the one who practices them, but all who cross his path. Let us leave, then, with a final image. Imagine a man standing in the marketplace, surrounded by chaos, traders shouting, rivals scheming, fools boasting, crowds pushing. He does not shout, he does not scheme, he does not boast, he does not push. He simply observes, calm, unhurried, his mind sovereign. Those around him exhaust themselves in noise and deception, but he remains whole. Who, in that moment, holds the greatest power? Not the loudest, not the most adorned, not the most feared, but the one who does not need to be anything other than himself. That is the Stoic victory. That is how you outsmart anyone. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.